Hi, my name's Levi Iverson, and today I'm going to be talking about education as resistance, and really the ethnic studies then compared to now. Education has always been more than just learning facts. It is also a place where power, culture, and identity are shaped. In occupied America, Rodolfo Acuna explains how schools were often used to erase Chicano culture, language, and history. Mexican American students were frequently segregated, punished for speaking Spanish, and taught curricula that ignored their experiences. However, education also became a site of resistance as students, teachers, and activists fought for representation and equality. This video argues that the struggles described in occupied America continue today through debates over ethnic studies, curriculum restrictions, and student activisms. By examining the past and present through borderlands theory and critical race theory, we can better understand why ethnic studies remains an important tool for resistance and empowerment. According to Acuna, schools played a major role in assimilating Mexican American children into dominant Anglo culture. Students were often discouraged or punished for speaking Spanish, and textbooks rarely included Chicano history or contribution. Acuna argues that these educational practices reinforced racial hierarchies and limited opportunities for Mexican Americans. By the 1960s, Chicano students began challenging these inequalities. One major example was the East Los Angeles blowouts of 1968, when thousands of students walked out of their schools to protest overcrowded classrooms, discriminatory treatment, and the lack of culturally relevant education. These protests demonstrated that education was not neutral. It could either reproduce inequality or challenge it. Acuna explains that the Chicano movement viewed education as a pathway towards liberation. Activists demanded bilingual education, greater access to higher education, and courses that reflected Chicano history and culture. Their efforts helped establish Chicano studies programs at universities across the United States. The struggle for ethnic studies can be understood through borderlands theory, developed by Gloria Anzulata. Borderlands theory argues that people living between cultures often create identities that draw from multiple experiences and traditions. For many Chicanos, schools historically ignored these identities and pressured students to choose one culture over another. Critical race theory also helps explain these educational struggles. Critical race theory argues that racism is not simply individual prejudice, but is embedded within institutions and policies. When schools exclude Chicano history and discourage bilingualism, they reinforce systemic inequalities rather than providing equal educational opportunities. These theories show why representation in education matters. When students see their communities reflected in the schoolwork, they are more likely to feel valued and engaged. Education becomes a way to preserve culture, challenge stereotypes, and build a stronger sense of identity. Personally, growing up in California, I've seen how discussions about race, identity, and history can create controversy. Yet, understanding different perspectives is important because it helps students understand both the past and the society they live in today. Today, debates over ethnic studies continue across the United States. In California, lawmakers have supported ethnic studies requirements for high school students, arguing that these courses promote inclusion and civic engagement. At the same time, people claim that ethnic studies programs are pretty divisive. Recent research has shown that ethnic studies course can improve students' attendance, academic performance, and engagement. A peer-reviewed study by Thomas D. and Emmy Penner found that students enrolled in ethnic study courses demonstrated higher academic achievement and stronger school participation. Current debates about curriculum, restricts book bans, and the teaching of race also reflects the same struggles described by Acuna. Just as Acuna and Chicano activists fought for representation in the 60s, students and educators today continue advocating for educational spaces that recognize diverse histories and experiences. The persistence of these debates demonstrates that the issues discussed in occupied America are not simply historical events. They remain active questions about whose stories are included in education and whose voices are heard. In conclusion, the history represented in Cunha's Occupied America shows that schools have often been used to suppress Chicano identity and culture. However, it also demonstrates how students and communities transform education into a tool for resistance and empowerment. From the East Los Angeles blowouts to today's ethnic studies debates, the fight for representation in education continues. Borderlands theory and critical race theory help us understand why these struggles remain important and why culturally relevant education matters. By learning about Chicano history and supporting inclusive education, we can help create schools that reflect the experiences of all students. Education should not erase identities. It should empower people to understand their history, value their culture, and participate fully in society. Thank you for listening.